Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there was a wise and just king named Aemon. His realm was vast, stretching across rolling hills and forests, with rivers that sparkled under the sunlight. He ruled with kindness and strength, always putting the needs of his people first. The people loved their king, for he was fair, and under his rule, prosperity flourished. King Aemon had one great wish, to find a queen who was worthy of his heart. He had searched far and wide, through many distant lands, seeking a woman whose beauty and spirit matched his own. He believed that only such a woman could be his true match. And so, one day, after many years of searching, the king's heart was captured by a woman named Queen Seraphina. She was a woman of extraordinary grace and beauty, her golden hair shimmering like sunlight and her eyes as deep as the oceans. Her voice was sweet, and her smile could melt even the coldest heart. She was a noble woman from a distant kingdom, and their marriage had been arranged by her father, the king of a neighboring land. Queen Seraphina's arrival at the palace was nothing short of magical. The entire kingdom was filled with joy, and celebrations were held in her honor. The king, in his wisdom, knew that the queen was more than just a beauty. She carried herself with dignity, kindness, and warmth, and he knew she would be an excellent partner in his reign. But as time went on, a strange unease settled within the king's heart. He began to notice something that puzzled him about his beautiful queen. Though she had given him all the appearances of a loving and devoted wife, there was one thing that did not seem to align with her perfection: she had never told him of her past. Whenever he asked her about her childhood, her family, or her previous life, her responses were always vague, as if the memories were buried deep inside her heart. At first, the king thought nothing of it, dismissing it as a small mystery in a marriage full of love and joy. However, one evening, as the king sat by his window, gazing at the full moon, a thought came to him that would not leave his mind. What if the queen had a secret? What if there was something she was hiding from him, something she didn't want him to know? A few days later, during a private conversation in the royal garden, the king, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, gently pressed the queen. "My love, you've always been a mystery to me," he said with a tender smile. "I know your beauty and your grace, but tell me, what was it like before you came to my kingdom? I want to know everything about you." The queen's eyes flickered with something that the king couldn't quite place, a shadow, perhaps, or a fleeting sadness. She smiled gently and said, "I have nothing to hide, my king. My past is just, not something I wish to dwell upon. I am yours now, and that is what matters." But the king, whose sharp mind could see through deception, could sense that she wasn't telling him the whole truth. He pressed further, his voice more insistent now. "Please, my queen, you must understand. I wish to know all of you." The queen took a deep breath, her eyes clouding with emotion. I am not the woman you think I am," she said softly, her voice trembling. The king's heart skipped a beat. He had feared that something was wrong, but he never expected such a confession. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The queen looked down, as if ashamed of her own words. "I am not the woman who you believe I am. I have never been with another man before you. I am a virgin." The king stared at her in disbelief. He had expected many things, but not this. He had married a woman of high nobility, a woman of immense beauty, and he had assumed that such a woman had experienced life in a way that he himself had. Yet here she was, revealing something that seemed so out of place in the world of royalty. "Why did you not tell me this before?" the king asked, his voice growing more serious. "I feared that you would think less of me," the queen replied, her voice shaking. "In a world where women are judged by their pasts, where honor is so often tied to a woman's virtue, I feared you would see me as less than what I appeared. I feared you might see me as unworthy." The king's heart softened as he listened to her words. He reached out, gently lifting her chin to look into her eyes. "My queen," he said, his voice filled with warmth, "your past does not define you. It is who you are now that matters to me. You are more than worthy." But as he spoke these words, the king noticed something strange. An inexplicable sense of unease continued to linger in the air. Something about the queen's confession didn't sit right with him. Despite his words of reassurance, the truth felt elusive, like a fog that refused to lift. That night, the king could not sleep. His mind raced with questions. He loved his queen dearly, but what had she truly hidden from him? Could there be more to her story than she had told him? Was it possible that her past was not as simple as she made it seem? The next morning, the king summoned his most trusted advisor, a wise old sage named Eldrin. Eldrin had served the kingdom for many years and had an unparalleled understanding of the mystical forces that governed the world. "Eldrin," the king said, his voice serious, "I have learned something about the queen. She claims to be a virgin, untouched by any man before me. But I fear there is more to this story. What do you know of her past?" Eldrin looked at the king with a knowing gaze, his eyes narrowing. "Your Majesty, there are whispers in the old books of prophecy," he said softly, "of a woman who would come to rule by your side. She was said to be untouched, not because she had never been with another, but because her heart was bound to a fate far beyond this world." The king's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, Eldrin? What fate?" "The queen, my king, is no ordinary woman. She is tied to an ancient curse, one that has been passed down through her bloodline for centuries," Eldrin explained, his voice low and serious. "The virginity she speaks of is not the kind you think. It is the key to a much greater power, one that could either save or doom your kingdom." The king's heart sank. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice filled with urgency. "You must uncover the truth, your Majesty," Eldrin said. "There are forces at work here that you do not yet understand. The queen's past holds the key to everything, and only by unlocking it can you protect your kingdom from a fate worse than death." The following days felt heavy, as though the very air around King Aemon had thickened with uncertainty. He could no longer simply enjoy the simple pleasures of his reign, as the mystery of his queen's past lingered in his mind like an unanswered question. The kingdom was still in peace, still thriving, but inside the palace, a silent storm raged. The king's heart, though filled with love for Seraphina, was torn with a growing doubt that refused to be quelled. Eldrin's cryptic words haunted him. A woman untouched, tied to an ancient curse. What could it mean? Who would curse a royal bloodline to such a fate? And why had Seraphina never spoken of this before? At dawn, the king made a decision. He would venture into the heart of the ancient forests that bordered the kingdom, to the hidden temple of the Old Ones, a place where only a few knew the secrets of the ancient world. He needed answers, and he would get them, no matter what it took. "Eldrin, prepare the horses," the king commanded, his tone firm. "We leave before the sun rises too high." The journey was long, through dense woods and over rocky hills, but at last, they arrived at the temple. The stone structure was ancient, with ivy creeping over its weathered facade. It was said to be a place of forgotten knowledge, a place where the first kings had once communed with the gods. Now, it stood silent, as though waiting for someone to come and awaken its secrets. Inside the temple, the air was thick with dust and the scent of old parchment. Eldrin led the way, his footfalls echoing through the vast halls, as they approached the heart of the temple, a chamber where the scrolls of ancient prophecies were said to be kept. There, beneath a stone archway, lay a massive tome, its cover adorned with symbols that none but the most learned could decipher. Eldrin ran his fingers over the text and began to read aloud, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "The Virgin of the Veil shall rise, untouched by the hand of man. Her heart will hold the key to the kingdom's fate, for she is the last of her kind. Her bloodline is cursed, bound by the gods themselves, to forever walk the line between life and death. Should she fall in love with a mortal king, his kingdom shall flourish, but should the curse take hold of her heart, it will lead them both to ruin." The king listened in stunned silence, his heart racing as Eldrin continued. Only one with the purest of heart may break the curse. The Virgin of the Veil shall be bound to the one who loves her, but she will never know peace, for the veil of her past will shroud her soul, and she will live only to watch the world around her wither. The words seemed to echo in the king's mind, as though they were alive. He turned to Eldrin, eyes wide with shock. Is this prophecy about my queen? Eldrin nodded grimly. It is, your majesty. Seraphina is the Virgin of the Veil, the last of an ancient bloodline. Her curse has been carried for generations. The prophecy speaks of a king and a queen, destined to rule together, but with a dark price. The queen will never know peace, for her heart will always be torn between the love she feels for you and the curse that haunts her blood. But what is this curse? The king asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why must it exist? Eldrin looked solemnly at the king. The curse was placed upon her bloodline by the gods themselves, as punishment for a long-forgotten transgression. Her ancestors made a grave mistake, one that shook the very foundations of the realm. The gods decreed that the Virgin of the Veil would bear the weight of this curse, destined to live in constant turmoil, torn between love and fate. King Aemon stood still for a moment, his mind racing as the truth of the prophecy settled into his heart. He could not bear the thought that his queen, the woman he loved so dearly, was cursed from birth. She had known nothing but sorrow, even if it had been hidden behind her beauty and grace. Then how do I break this curse? The king asked, his voice full of desperation. Eldrin's eyes darkened. There is a way, but it is not simple. The key lies within Seraphina's heart. You must help her confront her past, the memories she has buried deep inside her. Only by uncovering the truth of what happened to her ancestors can the curse be broken. But be warned, your majesty, some truths are far more dangerous than others. To seek the past is to risk the very fabric of your kingdom. If you are not careful, you may awaken forces that no one can control. The king's resolve hardened. He had to save his queen. He loved her more than anything, and if there was any way to free her from the burden of this curse, he would do it. No matter the cost. The king returned to the palace that evening, his mind heavy with the weight of the prophecy. He found Seraphina in the royal gardens, standing beside a fountain, her expraise. Her expression distant as she gazed into the flowing water. She looked up as he approached, her eyes bright with concern. My love, she said softly, where have you been? You look troubled. King Aemon took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation that would change everything. Seraphina, I have learned something that I believe will help us understand the curse that has haunted you for so long. Her face paled, and she took a step back. What are you talking about, my king? The prophecy, he said, his voice unwavering. I know what you are, and I know the burden you carry. The Virgin of the Veil, the one whose heart is bound by love and cursed by fate. I know the truth now, and we must face it together. Tears welled in Seraphina's eyes, and she turned away, as though the very mention of her past caused her to shudder. You don't understand, she whispered. I never wanted this curse. It was not my choice. I know, the king replied gently, his heart breaking for her. But together, we can end it. Together, we can uncover the truth and free you from the pain you've carried all your life. Seraphina turned back to face him, her face pale but filled with determination. I will do anything to end this, Aemon. But you must promise me one thing, anything, the king vowed. That no matter what we discover, you will still love me, she whispered. Even if the truth is more terrible than you can imagine. The king's heart ached for her, but he took her hand and kissed it softly. I love you, Seraphina, with all that I am. Nothing will change that. And so, they began the journey to uncover the truth, no longer as king and queen, but as two souls bound by love and the hope of breaking the chains that had bound them for so long. The next few days in the palace were filled with uncertainty. Queen Seraphina was more withdrawn than ever, her thoughts consumed by the revelation of the prophecy. King Aemon, meanwhile, had made plans to travel with her to the ancient temple once more, this time to seek deeper knowledge about the curse. The time had come to uncover everything, no matter the cost. Seraphina's heart was torn. She loved Aemon dearly, and for so long, she had kept her painful past locked away, hoping it would never come to light. The fear of what she might lose if he learned the whole truth haunted her. She had thought that love could be enough to conquer anything, but now she realized that love alone might not be enough to overcome the darkness that her bloodline carried. Yet, her loyalty to Aemon was unwavering. She could no longer live with the weight of the secret between them. The king arranged for a private journey. Disguised as common travelers, they would leave the palace in the dead of night to avoid attracting attention. Accompanied by Eldrin, they ventured into the deep forests once more, heading for the temple where answers awaited. As they approached the ancient stone structure, the eerie quiet of the forest seemed to embrace them. The wind whispered through the trees, and the moon cast long, haunting shadows across the path. Inside the temple, the atmosphere was thick with ancient magic. The air was heavy, as though the very stones of the place had absorbed centuries of secrets. Eldrin led them to a deeper part of the temple, a dark, forgotten chamber that even the most seasoned scholars of the land rarely spoke of. The walls here were covered in inscriptions, the writing so old that only the most learned could read it. Eldrin ran his fingers over the stone, muttering under his breath as he translated the ancient language. "Here it is," Eldrin said, his voice low and full of reverence. "This is the heart of the curse. The story of your ancestors, Seraphina." Seraphina stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. The walls of the chamber seemed to come alive, revealing the history she had long tried to forget. The story that Eldrin uncovered was one of tragedy and regret. It began with Seraphina's great-great-grandmother, a woman of incredible beauty and power, who had been the last of a powerful royal bloodline. She was once a queen in a distant kingdom, loved by her people and feared by her enemies. But her downfall came when she made a terrible bargain with a being of unimaginable power, an ancient, godlike entity who offered her immortality in exchange for a price. The price was simple but horrifying: the queen's descendants would forever be cursed to live between the worlds of the living and the dead. They would never experience true peace, for their hearts would be torn between the love they would bear for a king and the insurmountable weight of the curse. Only one person in each generation, the Virgin of the Veil, would bear the full brunt of this curse, suffering until the truth of her bloodline was uncovered and the curse was lifted. The bargain that Seraphina's ancestor made did not only bind her family to the curse, it also ensured that they could never truly escape their fate. Each Virgin of the Veil was destined to fall in love with a king, a ruler who would be the key to their suffering. The queen would always be torn between the love for her king and the curse that would bring ruin to them both. "The gods are unforgiving," Eldrin murmured as he finished translating. "What happened to her after the bargain was struck, her fate is what led to the prophecy. She was damned from the moment she made that choice, and her descendants would suffer the same." Seraphina's knees buckled, and she sank to the cold floor of the chamber. "My bloodline, cursed for all time," she whispered, her voice broken. "My great-great-grandmother sought immortality, but she only cursed us to live in torment." King Aemon knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "This is not your fault, Seraphina," he said, his voice filled with fierce tenderness. "You were born into this curse, but you are not defined by it. Together, we can break it. We will find a way." But Seraphina shook her head, the weight of the past pressing on her heart. "The gods may have cursed my bloodline, but I fear it is not only the curse that threatens us now. It is the knowledge of this curse that will tear us apart. I have kept the truth hidden from you because I feared you would no longer love me, and now," she trailed off, tears streaming down her face. "Now I fear that even if we try, the curse will consume us both." Aemon gently cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. "You must believe me, Seraphina. This curse is a challenge, but it is not the end. We are stronger together than any curse could ever be." His words seemed to reach her heart, and for the first time since the prophecy had been revealed, a flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. "You truly believe that we can break this curse?" she whispered. "I know we can," Aemon said with conviction. "But we must act quickly. The longer the curse remains unbroken, the stronger it grows. If we wait too long, it will consume us." Eldrin stepped forward, his face grim. "There is one more part of the prophecy that you must know," he said softly. "The curse can only be broken by a sacrifice, an act of true love that transcends the very essence of the curse itself. But there is a great danger. If the sacrifice is made wrongly, it could doom you both forever. There is no easy path." Seraphina's eyes widened. "What kind of sacrifice?" Eldrin shook his head. "I do not know. The texts do not say. But you must be prepared, both of you. Whatever choice you make, it will change everything." The journey ahead of them was one fraught with uncertainty. The king and queen, armed with the knowledge of Seraphina's cursed bloodline, knew that they could no longer wait. The prophecy had been set in motion, and they were now bound to it in ways they could not fully understand. As they left the temple and made their way back to the kingdom, Seraphina could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had always thought of her love for Aemon as the greatest thing she had ever known. But now, it seemed that their love would either save or destroy them. King Aemon, ever steadfast and determined, did his best to reassure her. "We will face whatever comes together. I will not lose you, Seraphina. You are my heart, and I will fight for us, no matter what it takes." And so, as they returned to the kingdom, the real trials began. The curse had been awakened, and with it, came a series of tests that would challenge their love, their resolve, and their very lives. Seraphina's ancestors had suffered, and now it was her turn to break the chains of the past.